fans of the strange, dark, and mysterious. If you're into stories that make your skin crawl and keep you up at night, then buckle up, because this one's a doozy. Before we begin, tell me, where are you listening from and what time is it there? Next story. Hollow Smile. In late 2019, a quiet set of calls started clustering around an old riverside park in Dayton, Ohio, and nobody agreed why. Marcus Dale was 34, a night security contractor hired to watch a small construction yard beside the Great Miami River. He took the job for steady pay and predictable hours since his previous contract ended without warning that summer. The site sat near Deeds Point, where trails cut through trees and the river carried sound far after midnight. On his first week, he logged small things, padlock scratches, boot prints, and a sweet chemical smell near the fence. Nothing was stolen, yet every morning the same detail returned, a chalky smile drawn on plywood facing the water. Marcus photographed it and emailed his supervisor, who replied that teenagers had been drifting through for months, reportedly. Dispatch logs later showed the first related call came on August 17, 2019, listed as suspicious person near the trailhead. Officers found nobody, but they noted a white plastic mask in the grass, wiped clean and left upright like it was watching. Some locals claimed it was a prank linked to an online dare, while others insisted the river carried a curse from older drownings. Investigators never confirmed either story, and state records showed no formal incident report attached to that call number. Marcus did not care about legends, but he cared about patterns, and the pattern was starting to feel deliberate. On September 3, 2019, he arrived at 10:58 p.m. and found the gate chain threaded through itself, then tightened hard. It was the kind of knot that wasted time, forcing him to cut and replace it, which his client billed as damage. He walked the perimeter with a flashlight, counted fresh cigarette ends, and heard a soft tapping from the riverside. At the shoreline, he saw the smile again, now carved into wet sand, wide and shallow, as if drawn with a stick. He radioed the non-emergency line, then waited with his back to the fence, trying to keep the river in view. The responding unit noted nothing unusual, yet the officer asked Marcus whether he had noticed the face in the water before. Marcus said no, and the officer did not explain, only glanced toward the current and wrote for a long time in silence. 2 days later, a woman named Eliza Hart drove down from Columbus, 29, a graduate research assistant studying urban folklore and rumor cycles. She said she was gathering accounts for a seminar project, and Marcus agreed because he wanted someone else documenting details. Eliza had read archived notes from a retired park ranger describing a recurring grin symbol tagged under bridges since 2011. The ranger wrote that complaints surged whenever the river ran high, though records conflict on whether the tags appeared before storms. Eliza asked Marcus to walk her along the path after his shift started, and he insisted they stay within sight of the lights. She accepted, then described how symbols like that can spread, carried by fear more than fact, reportedly. Marcus listened without reacting, but he noticed her hands tremble whenever the trail turned toward darker brush near the riverbank. Near a bench, they found a small pile of river stones arranged like teeth and a cracked mirror facing the path. Eliza photographed it, then said some locals claimed mirrors were used to trap bad luck, though investigators never confirmed such rituals. Marcus kicked dirt over the mirror and moved on, because sharp glass and public trails are a simple liability risk. That night, at 1:14 a.m., Marcus's camera feed glitched on one frame, and the next frame showed the plywood smile painted over black. He replayed it again and again, but the gap stayed the same, exactly 11 seconds missing from the recording block. He checked the device, found no tamper alert, and saw no power drop in the system history. Dispatch logs show he called it in at 1:22 a.m., describing possible sabotage and requesting a patrol pass by the gate. The patrol arrived at 1:47 a.m., and the officer wrote that the air smelled like solvent near the plywood panel. No suspect was found, yet a second unit noted faint footprints leading toward the river, then stopping at the mud line. The officer joked that the river swallowed them, but his tone changed when Marcus asked to see the footprints himself. Marcus walked there with them and saw the prints end sharply, as if someone stepped onto something smooth, then vanished. The next morning, Eliza sent Marcus a message with a scan from a county file from 2009 about an unclaimed body recovered downstream. The file described the victim as unidentified, adult male, with dental work, but no match in the database at the time. What caught Eliza's attention was a line about a theatrical mask found nearby, white plastic with a smiling mouth, and no fingerprints recovered. State records show that evidence entry exists, yet a later inventory list does not include the mask, and records conflict on its disposal. Eliza wrote that missing items often have normal explanations, but she asked Marcus whether the mask in the grass matched the older description. Marcus said it did, and he hated how quickly that answer made the story feel older than his job. He considered quitting, but the contract paid weekly, and he had rent due on a small apartment across town. On September 18, 2019, the construction crew reported fresh scratches on a stored excavator and a smile etched into the seat vinyl. Marcus inspected it and found the cuts were careful, not random slashes like someone traced a template in dim light. He pulled his camera timestamps and saw nothing, which meant either the cameras missed the angle or somebody knew exactly where they looked. That afternoon, Marcus met Eliza at a coffee shop in the Oregon District, and she brought printed screenshots of old forum posts. The post described a figure called the Grinner, but the writers disagreed on details, and some claimed it was a way to scare kids home. Eliza warned Marcus that attention can feed hoaxes, yet she also admitted the gaps in documentation bothered her more than rumors. She said archived notes mentioned a man in a reflective vest who offered directions, then vanished when people turned around. Marcus kept his face neutral, but he remembered the officer's earlier comment about a face in the water, and he felt irritated by coincidence. He returned to work that night with a new plan: stay inside the lit zone, log every sound, and avoid chasing shadows near the river. At 12:36 a.m., he heard a slow clapping from the trail, spaced out like someone keeping time, then stopping whenever he moved. He watched the camera monitor and saw a pale oval appear near the fence line, motionless, then tilt slightly toward the plywood panel. Marcus zoomed the feed and saw it was a mask propped on a stick planted in the ground facing the site like a warning sign. He called it in, and dispatch logs show the operator asked whether he felt threatened, and Marcus answered that he felt watched, reportedly. Officers arrived and removed the stick, but one officer quietly asked Marcus if the mask smelled like river mud or like cleaning chemicals. Marcus said it smelled clean, and the officer muttered that was the part he did not like, then refused to elaborate further. After the patrol left, Marcus walked the fence line and found a handwritten note folded under a rock, damp but readable. It said only one sentence, "Keep your face open," and the handwriting looked careful, rounded, almost like a child practicing letters. Marcus bagged it and marked the time because he knew paper evidence matters more than stories told later by stressed people. 2 days later, he delivered the note to a station clerk, and the clerk said evidence intake was closed, then suggested Marcus come back Monday. Marcus asked for a receipt, and the clerk finally logged it as found property, which later made it hard to trace in state records. Eliza tried to request the item through a records inquiry, but the response she received said no matching property entry existed under that date. Records conflict again there, and investigators never confirmed whether the note was misplaced, misfiled, or quietly discarded as nonsense. On October 6, 2019, the weather shifted and the river rose after heavy rain upstream, pushing debris into the banks. That night, Marcus found the plywood panel replaced, even though the crew had not scheduled any new material delivery for that week. The new sheet was clean, unmarked, but the smell of fresh paint hung around it, and the nails were driven too neatly. Marcus checked the site inventory, then called his supervisor, who said no replacement was authorized, and told Marcus to document everything. Marcus took photos, then noticed something carved into the backside of the plywood, a shallow smile hidden where casual eyes would miss it. He felt a flash of anger, because whoever did it understood procedures and knew where guards tend to look first. Eliza came down again the next day, and Marcus showed her the hidden carving while keeping his voice flat and controlled. She traced the grooves with a gloved finger and said the cuts looked older than the board, which made no sense given the wood's new edges. She suggested the board might not be new at all, only cleaned and reinstalled, which would fit with the chemical odor in dispatch logs. Eliza said county file from 2009 mentioned a salvaged panel found near a flood line tagged with similar marks before storage. Marcus asked how a stored panel from a decade earlier ended up on his site, and Eliza admitted she had no proven chain of custody. That evening, Marcus found himself scanning faces in passing cars, then hating himself for acting like a man inside a rumor spiral. He stuck to his rules, stayed calm, wrote down times, and refused to chase any sound that pulled him toward the waterline. At 2 a.m., his radio hissed once. Then a faint voice came through, sounding like his own name, though the channel was secure. He checked the settings and saw no cross traffic, and the system log showed no incoming call, only a brief spike in static. Marcus wrote it down anyway because uncertainty belongs on paper when memories start reshaping themselves after stress and lost sleep. The following week, a jogger reported a man standing under the bridge near the park wearing a reflective vest and holding a white object. Dispatch logs show the caller said the man smiled too long, then turned his head slowly like a mannequin shifting position. Officers arrived and found only a reflective vest draped over a guardrail, clean and dry despite mist, with no tags inside. Some locals claimed the vest belonged to a missing maintenance worker, while others said it was staged to bait responders into the dark. Investigators never confirmed a missing worker linked to that vest, and state records show no active missing person case tied to park staff. Marcus heard about the call from a patrol officer, and he noticed the officer avoided eye contact while describing the scene, reportedly. Eliza asked Marcus if the rumors were changing his behavior, and Marcus said only that he slept less and double-checked locks more. She told him that fear often makes witnesses align their stories, yet here the details kept diverging, which she found worse. She shared archived notes about conflicting witness claims, where one person described a grin on a mask and another described a grin on a face. Marcus said faces and masks blur at night, especially near water reflections, and he refused to add anything beyond what he saw on camera. On October 28, 2019, Marcus's client requested extra patrols after someone left teeth on the ground, small, clean, and arranged in a line. The responding officer wrote that they were animal teeth, likely from a raccoon, yet the arrangement looked intentional and too symmetrical. Marcus photographed them beside a ruler, then noticed faint paint drops leading toward the trail, spaced as if someone walked carefully. He followed only as far as the lit edge, and he saw a smear on a tree, a curved line that could be a smile or a simple brushstroke. He stopped there because the brush beyond swallowed light, and he knew a guard alone has no reason to become a story himself. Later, Eliza pulled weather data and found that each cluster of calls lined up with high water, though the correlation was imperfect. Records conflict on the first appearance of the symbol, but the strongest pattern sat around seasonal floods and late-night trail traffic. Eliza suggested a person might be using flood debris to stage scenes, borrowing driftwood, old boards, and recovered objects to build continuity. Marcus agreed that explanation was human and practical, yet it still left one question. Why was the person so focused on smiles? Eliza said smiles can be forced, and forced smiles make people uneasy because they mimic safety while signaling control, reportedly. Marcus did not respond, but he remembered the note telling him to keep his face open, and he felt his jaw tighten. In early November, Marcus requested a second camera angle from his supervisor, and the request was approved after a client complaint. The new camera faced the river, catching the trail entry and a strip of shoreline, and Marcus hoped it would kill the mystery fast. On November 9, 2019, at 1:33 a.m., the river camera captured a figure standing still at the water's edge for 4 minutes. The figure wore a light-colored hood, and the face was bright, but the image was too grainy to confirm whether it was skin or plastic. Then the figure lifted an arm and placed something on the ground, and the feed flickered once, though it did not cut out entirely. When Marcus reviewed it, he saw the object remained after the figure walked away, a white oval resting upright, facing the camera. Marcus called patrol and waited inside the fence, refusing to approach, while the object sat there like it had been posed for evidence photos. Officers retrieved it and found it was a mask, but its surface was scuffed as if dragged through gravel, and the inside smelled like river silt. One officer noted the mouth had been altered, widened with a blade, then sanded smooth, which matched the neat cuts Marcus had seen before. State records later listed the mask as collected, yet Eliza's later request returned a response saying the item could not be located. Records conflict again, and investigators never confirmed whether the mask was lost, destroyed, or kept outside standard storage procedures. After that night, the calls slowed, and the plywood smiles stopped appearing, leaving Marcus with empty shifts and a restless mind. He thought that meant the person moved on, but Eliza warned him that quiet can mean attention shifted to a new target nearby. Marcus finished his contract in late November and took a different job in Cincinnati, telling himself the river story belonged to the park now. Eliza kept collecting accounts, and she wrote that the Grinner myth declined online, replaced by newer rumors that borrowed the same Grin imagery. In a final email, she said archived notes suggested this pattern had happened before, cycles of symbols flaring, then fading, then returning years later. Marcus did not reply, but he saved the message, because he had learned that the worst part was not fear. It was unresolved documentation. In March 2020, a short entry surfaced in a local bulletin. A hiker found a stack of cleaned river stones shaped like teeth near the same bench. Dispatch logs show a brief response, no suspect, and a note that the scene looked staged, yet harmless, and not worth extended resources. Some locals claimed the smile was back, while others said bored people were reviving an old story for attention, reportedly. Investigators never confirmed a single person behind it, and state records showed no arrests, no charges, and no official link to the 2009 file. What remains is a trail of partial reports, missing evidence entries, and conflicting witness descriptions that never align long enough to settle cleanly. Next story. Late prayer. On a wet October night in Bangor, Maine, a 911 line stayed open for 7 minutes with someone whispering a prayer. Dispatch logs reportedly show no caller ID, yet the audio file was saved under a real case number. The next morning, state records show a wellness check assigned to paramedic Daniel Rourke, age 32, already on shift. Daniel worked for a private ambulance service contracted in Penobscot County, and his route often crossed quiet roads near older churches. He was sent with Deputy Sean Kelleher, age 41, because the call mentioned a weapon in the background. The address was not a home, but an unused roadside chapel outside Brewer, according to archive notes. County file from 2009 listed the chapel as deconsecrated after a fire code dispute. The chapel sat behind a small tree line, and the lot looked empty except for a single sedan parked crooked near grass. Daniel noted the sedan had no plate on the front, which was legal, and rain hid most details. Sean checked the door and found it latched, yet the wood felt warm, as if recently handled. Reportedly, a faint voice carried from inside, but neither man agreed later on what words were spoken. Daniel called out through the door and stated his name, then waited for a reply that did not come. Sean tried the handle again, and the latch opened with no resistance, as if it had not been locked. Inside, the air smelled like damp plaster and old smoke, consistent with a long closed building. A small battery lantern sat on the front pew, still on, and its light fell across scattered hymn books. They moved slowly toward the altar area and found wet footprints leading down the center aisle. Daniel later told a supervisor the prints looked barefoot, though he admitted the tread edges were hard to judge. Sean photographed the aisle with his phone, and the images were later requested but never produced publicly. Investigators never confirmed whether those prints matched anyone who could be tied to the 911 recording. Behind the altar, a narrow door opened into a storage room with shelves and a folding table. On that table sat a cheap handheld radio tuned to a local station, volume low, with static breaking between words. Daniel reported hearing the phrase "late prayer" twice, yet dispatch audio did not include that phrase clearly. Some locals claim the chapel had a history of midnight gatherings, but records conflict on who organized them. Daniel found a person crouched near the back wall, hands over ears, rocking and breathing fast. The person was a woman named Maya Ellison, age 29, employed as a county clerk in Brewer, according to her later statement. She said she came to the chapel to pray after a family argument and wanted a quiet place. Sean asked why she called 911, and she insisted she did not, then asked why they were there. Maya had no visible injuries, but her wrists were reddened as if from rubbing against something rough. Daniel checked her pupils and asked basic questions, and she answered correctly, though her voice shook. She said she arrived around 9:30 and stayed alone, but she heard footsteps and thought someone entered behind her. Sean asked about the sedan outside, and she said it was hers, then added she did not remember parking it that way. Daniel requested that Maya step outside for fresh air, and she refused until Sean stood behind her near the doorway. As she rose, a hymn book fell from the shelf without clear cause, and both men noted it in separate reports. Investigators never confirmed whether that fall was due to wind, unstable stacking, or someone moving nearby. Maya looked at the book and said it opened to a page that was not hers, then stopped talking. Outside, rain hit harder, and Daniel wrapped Maya in a spare blanket while Sean ran the sedan VIN. The VIN returned clean, and the registration matched Maya, according to state records reviewed later by a supervisor. Sean asked dispatch to replay the 911 audio, and the operator reportedly heard breathing with faint words again. Daniel asked Maya if she used a second phone, and she said no, then asked if the audio sounded like her. Daniel offered transport for evaluation, and Maya agreed after a long pause, staring at the chapel door. In the ambulance, she said she had been sleep deprived for 3 nights due to stress at work. She also said she heard someone reciting prayer lines in a cadence that did not match her upbringing. Daniel documented that Maya used the phrase late prayer, then corrected herself and said she meant late night prayer. At the hospital in Bangor, Maya was evaluated and released within hours, with no involuntary hold documented. The case should have ended there, yet a second call arrived 1 days later from the same chapel. Dispatch logs reportedly list the call time as 1:17 and again show no caller ID data. The audio included a steady tapping sound, and the operator wrote that it matched a pew or wooden railing. This time, Daniel was off duty, but Sean responded with another deputy and found the chapel door open again. Inside, they found the same lantern, yet its batteries were dead, and the switch was in the on position. A sheet of paper lay on the altar with a prayer printed from a website, and the ink was smeared. County file from 2009 had no record of electricity in the building, so any light source required someone to bring it. Sean contacted Maya by phone, and she answered at home, sounding confused, according to archived notes. She said she had not been near the chapel since the ambulance ride and asked why her name was mentioned again. Sean did not tell her details, yet later reports show her name was written on the paper found at the altar. The writing was block letters, and investigators never confirmed whose handwriting it matched. In a follow-up interview, Maya stated she recognized the prayer text because she had searched it years earlier after a funeral. She said she did not print it and did not own the type of paper found at the chapel. State records show she had access to office printers, but there was no documented print log produced publicly. Some locals claimed the paper looked freshly handled, while others said damp could have smeared old ink quickly. Daniel learned about the second call from coworkers and requested the audio through internal channels. A supervisor allowed him to hear it once, and he later summarized it as breath plus a soft male voice. Daniel said the voice did not sound like Maya, and he noted a faint clicking like a radio scan. Investigators never confirmed whether the sound came from the same handheld radio found earlier. Records conflict on whether that radio was seized, tagged, or left in place. Over the next month, there were 3 more calls, each short, each from the same cell tower region. Dispatch logs reportedly show that the operator could hear a prayer line, then a pause, then a muffled sob. The cadence varied, which led one investigator to suggest multiple speakers, according to archived notes. Another investigator suggested the sound could be a recording played near the receiver, which would explain the consistent background noise. No one publicly confirmed which theory was favored by the department. Sean returned to the chapel during daylight and found new padlocks on the doors, installed without county authorization. State records show the property owner was a small trust, and paperwork listed a contact who lived out of state. Sean cut the locks, entered, and photographed the interior, then noticed a neat line of pennies on the altar. Each penny was dated after 2011, and the line stopped at a single older coin from 2009. Some locals claimed the coins were an offering, but investigators never confirmed any religious group connection. Maya was questioned again because her work involved older county archives, including property files and death records. She said she had looked up the chapel history after the first night because she wanted to understand why it felt familiar. County file from 2009 contained a note about a volunteer custodian named Calvin Bryce, age 58, who died months later. Maya said she did not know Calvin, yet she admitted she had read his name and felt unsettled. Records conflict on whether Calvin died of illness or an accidental fall at a nearby riverbank. Daniel searched public obituaries and found Calvin's death listed as sudden, with a brief service held in Brewer. He told Sean that the prayer heard on the recordings sounded like a line from Calvin's published memorial pamphlet. Sean asked how Daniel could know that, and Daniel said he recognized the phrasing from his own family services. Investigators never confirmed the pamphlet connection, and the department did not add it to the official case summary. Some locals claimed Calvin had led informal prayer meetings at the chapel, but state records do not list any permit for gatherings. A break came when a dispatcher noticed that each call ended exactly when the operator asked for a name. Reportedly, the caller never spoke during questions, only during the prayer lines, which seemed timed. A county technician reviewed the recordings and wrote that the audio had compression artifacts consistent with a playback device. Another technician wrote that the breathing sounded live, not recorded, and that the rhythm shifted naturally. Records conflict, and neither report was signed in a way that allowed easy verification. Sean requested a tower dump for the call windows, and a limited list was produced, according to archived notes. One number appeared twice near the chapel during the calls, yet it was not linked to Maya. The subscriber information was a prepaid account purchased in Portland, Maine in 2019, paid with cash. Investigators never confirmed who bought it, and the store camera footage was reportedly overwritten. Some locals claimed a young man had bragged about prank calls, but the claim was never supported by dispatch logs. Daniel asked to ride along during a planned stakeout, and Sean agreed because the call pattern suggested another attempt. They parked near the chapel on a cold night, staying dark, watching the lot through rain-streaked glass. Around 1:10, headlights appeared, then shut off, and a figure moved toward the chapel door with a small bag. Daniel reported the figure moved with a limp, while Sean later wrote the gate looked normal and the difference remained unresolved. When the 911 line opened at 1:17, both men heard faint speech from their car radio separate from the dispatch channel. Sean approached on foot and saw the door open, then close, without any visible hand on the latch. He entered and found the handheld radio on the folding table again, now tuned to a different frequency. The figure was gone, and the only movement was the radio's scan light blinking in a steady pattern. Daniel stayed outside and heard a low voice through the chapel walls. Then silence, then a quick shuffle. Investigators never confirmed whether the voice came from inside or from a nearby vehicle on the road. Inside the storage room, Sean found the small bag on the floor, and it held a portable speaker and a spare battery pack. The speaker was still warm, and its power light was on, suggesting recent use, according to archived notes. Sean called for Daniel, and Daniel entered, then stared at the table where the prayer paper sat again. The paper had a handwritten note, and it read, "Do not answer when asked," written in block letters. No fingerprint match was reported publicly, and the item chain of custody was later questioned in a county review. Maya was notified because her name was written again, and she arrived at the station with an attorney. She denied involvement and offered an alibi, saying she was at her sister's home in Orono that night. State records show her phone pinged near Orono, yet tower ranges overlap, and investigators never confirmed exact location. Her attorney requested the speaker evidence, and the department refused pending review, according to archived notes. Some locals claimed Maya was being framed to silence her, though no motive was established in any official file. Daniel later told a supervisor that Maya looked genuinely surprised when shown a photo of the note. Sean did not describe her reaction in his report, only that she refused further questions. The prepaid number was traced to another town, yet it was inactive by the time investigators obtained warrants. A county file from 2009 resurfaced during the review, noting that Calvin Bryce had once reported missing hymn books. That note mentioned a young volunteer, unnamed, who disliked being questioned and who avoided giving his name to officials. The case shifted toward identifying that volunteer, but the file did not list him, and the chapel trust records were thin. An investigator contacted former parish members in Brewer and Bangor, and several reportedly mentioned a teen who drifted between churches. Some described him as polite until asked personal questions, then suddenly withdrawn, consistent with the call pattern. Others said the story was rumor, and that no such teen existed, which added another conflict in records. Investigators never confirmed whether those interviews were recorded or just summarized. In December, the calls stopped as abruptly as they began, and the chapel was boarded by the trust. Dispatch logs reportedly show no further open-line incidents from that tower sector after that month. Daniel kept working the Bangor area, and he told coworkers he avoided that road whenever possible. Maya remained employed, and no charges were filed against her according to state records available later. The portable speaker and note were logged as evidence, yet a later county audit listed them as missing for 4 days before reappearing. Years later, a records request produced the first night audio for a limited public review, and the file sounded degraded. The prayer lines were faint, and a listener could interpret different words, which led to inconsistent transcripts. One transcript included late prayer, while another did not, and records conflict on who prepared them. Investigators never confirmed whether the audio had been processed, filtered, or copied between systems. The dispatch operator's original notes remained the most detailed, and they described a voice that sounded close to the microphone. In 2019, a separate complaint came in from a nearby resident who said a car idled by the boarded chapel after midnight. The resident reportedly saw a man step out, carry a small bag, and stand at the door as if listening. When a spotlight hit, the man left quickly and no plate was captured, according to archived notes. The report was filed, then closed because no crime was observed and no entry was confirmed. Some locals claimed the man was the same figure from the stakeout, but investigators never confirmed that link. Daniel was contacted by a county reviewer during that period and asked whether he believed the chapel calls were staged. He answered that the evidence suggested a recording, yet he could not explain the warmth of objects or the timing of the radio interference. Sean gave a separate statement and focused on the portable speaker, saying it proved intent to create an effect. The reviewer wrote that both accounts were credible but incomplete, and that chain of custody gaps reduced confidence. County file from 2009 was cited again, emphasizing how little the trust maintained the property history. Maya later filed a complaint about being named in documents without evidence, and the county responded with a formal apology. State records show the apology acknowledged that her name appeared on items, but it did not assign blame for how it happened. Maya declined interviews, and her attorney stated she wanted distance from the chapel issue permanently. Some locals claimed she moved away, yet public records show she remained in the Bangor area for at least several years. Investigators never confirmed whether the note writer knew Maya personally or chose her name from county staff listings. By the time the chapel was sold, the boards were removed, and contractors reported finding nothing unusual inside. Archived notes from the sale mention old smoke stains, scattered coins, and a broken folding table, but no electronics. The new owner renovated and installed cameras, and no further calls were linked to that location afterward. Dispatch logs reportedly show the prepaid number was never used again, and it was later recycled by the carrier. Records conflict on whether the case was officially closed or left inactive, but the final memo listed it as unresolved. Even with the speaker evidence, the core problem remained, because the first call had no traceable origin and no confirmed physical caller. Some locals claimed a curse, yet investigators never confirmed any pattern beyond timing and a consistent fear response. Daniel continued to describe the voice as intimate and close, while Sean emphasized the staged feel of the scene. Maya maintained she went there only once, to pray late, and she never called for help. In the county file from 2009, a margin note reads, "Do not answer when asked," and no one could explain why it was written there. Next story. The doll. In late October, a county employee opened a sealed evidence crate and found a child's doll that was never logged. Claire Benson was 31, a county records archivist in Binghamton, New York, assigned to digitize retired evidence inventories. She arrived with Jonah Price, 34, an evidence technician, because the storage annex had recent break-ins. Their goal was simple: create a clean list and move low-priority items to a new shelf row. The annex smelled like wet cardboard and disinfectant, and the overhead lights clicked on with a delay. In the back corner, they found a crate stamped with a faded case number and an intake year written as 2009. The crate's tag reportedly matched a missing child investigation, but state records listed no physical evidence under that number. Claire checked archive notes from the county clerk, and the handwriting referenced a doll recovered near a creek. Jonah pulled dispatch logs from a shared drive, and the call summary mentioned a search party and a found item bag. Still, the official evidence ledger showed nothing except a line that read "removed for review in 2011. When Claire asked who reviewed it, the answer depended on which copy of the ledger she opened. Inside the crate sat a cloth doll with yarn hair and a cracked plastic face, dressed in a homemade blue smock. There was no name tag, no evidence seal, and no chain of custody card taped to the lid. Jonah photographed it, and his camera timestamp later conflicted with the annex clock by nearly 20 minutes. Claire noticed the doll's hands were stained, like rust or dried clay, but the fabric looked recently washed. A note card was tucked under the doll, and it listed only one word: Lila. Claire searched the county file from 2009 and found a child named Lila Garner reported missing near a riverside park. The case narrative said Lila was 6, last seen after a fall festival, and her mother worked nights at a nursing home. Witness statements conflicted about clothing color, and one account claimed Lila carried a doll that looked similar. Investigators never confirmed the doll's origin because the recovery site was trampled by volunteers before tape went up. Some locals claimed the doll belonged to a different child, and that rumor never fully died. Jonah checked the annex's access logs, and there was no sign anyone opened that crate in years. Yet the crate's screws were bright, and the wood around them showed fresh bite marks from a drill. Claire asked maintenance for work orders, and none listed that corner of the room. The annex supervisor insisted the crate was moved during a mold cleanup in 2019, but the cleanup report named a different aisle. Dispatch logs from the cleanup week showed an alarm call, and the responding deputy wrote that all doors were secure. That note did not explain the new screws, and it did not explain the doll's clean fabric. They carried the doll to a metal table, and Jonah placed it beside evidence bags for photographing. Claire stepped away to scan a folder, and Jonah turned to connect his camera to a laptop. When he looked back, the doll was sitting upright, even though he left it on its back. He did not claim it moved by itself, and he later said the table vibrated from a passing truck. Still, the laptop file shows a photo taken seconds earlier, and the doll appears on its back. A second photo taken right after shows it upright, and there is no hand in frame. Claire wrote a short incident note for internal tracking, careful to avoid dramatic language that could trigger unnecessary complaints. She also emailed her director, attaching photos and the crate tag, asking for guidance on chain of custody repair. The director replied with a single question: "Where exactly did you find that?" Claire answered, and then the director asked her to stop work and lock the annex until morning. Jonah listened, and he called his precinct contact to ask if the case number should be reopened. The contact reportedly said the number was flagged years ago, but no one could explain why. That night, Claire looked up the old detectives involved, and most had retired or died. One name remained active in state records, a former lieutenant who now worked private security in Syracuse. Claire called him, and he sounded tired before she even finished her first sentence. He said he remembered the Garner case, but he denied any doll ever being booked into evidence. He also claimed the crate number belonged to seized electronics, not a missing child file. Claire checked the ledger again, and the electronics line appeared only in one copy, not the others. Records conflict like that are common in scanned archives, but the timing made her pause. The next morning, Claire returned with Jonah and a third person, Marisol Haynes, 28, a county IT contractor tasked with auditing access permissions. Marisol's goal was practical: confirm who touched the digital ledgers and when they were modified. They unlocked the annex, and the crate was still on the table where Jonah left it. The doll, however, was inside a plastic evidence bag sealed with a barcode strip. None of them remembered bagging it, and the barcode did not match any county inventory sequence. Marisol scanned it anyway, and her software returned no record found. Jonah suggested someone came in after hours, which would mean forced entry or a key used off the books. Dispatch logs showed no alarm trips, and the annex's camera system was offline for a scheduled upgrade. Marisol checked the upgrade ticket, and the time window was changed twice by an unknown admin account. That account name did not exist in state records, and it did not appear in the county staff directory. Claire tried to treat it as a clerical error, but the new bag looked factory fresh. Even the bag's adhesive seam smelled like recent plastic, not dust and age. They moved the doll and crate into a secured room at the main county building, and Jonah signed a temporary custody form. Claire placed copies of her notes in a shared folder, and she printed a paper backup for the file cabinet. 2 hours later, the shared folder vanished, and the paper backup was missing from the cabinet. Marisol pulled audit trails, and the deletion came from Claire's own login. Claire was at lunch when it happened, and her phone location later placed her across town. Marisol told her the system can be spoofed, but she also said this looked deliberate. Claire asked for older backups, and Marisol recovered a partial archive that included a memo dated 2011. The memo said the Garner file was reviewed for transfer and the doll was removed for lab consultation. There was no lab name and no receipt, only a signature that looked like the retired lieutenant's initials. Claire compared the initials to payroll signatures found in state records, and they did not match. Jonah called the state lab, and the receptionist said no such consult existed under that case number. Investigators never confirmed where the doll went because the paper trail stopped in mid-sentence. Over the next week, Claire interviewed 2 retired clerks who remembered unusual requests during the Garner search. One clerk said a man in plain clothes demanded access to evidence shelves, claiming he had federal clearance. Another clerk said the same man returned a day later and she heard him arguing about a doll. These accounts reportedly were never written down because supervisors told staff not to create new paper. Claire found no federal badge record tied to the described name, but the description matched a local deputy who later resigned. Records conflict again, and the people remembering were speaking after many years. Still, both clerks independently mentioned the word Lila. Jonah decided to rephotograph the doll under controlled conditions, using a stabilized tripod and a time-synced clock. He placed it on a foam block, and he filmed a continuous shot while Claire read case excerpts aloud. The film showed nothing moving, but it captured faint tapping sounds at irregular intervals. Jonah said it could be the HVAC duct settling, and the building is old enough for that. Yet the tapping lined up with moments when Claire said Lila's name, then stopped when she paused. That pattern could be coincidence, and no investigator put it in an official report. A week later, a county courier delivered a padded envelope to Claire's desk, with no return address and no postage stamp. Inside was a photocopy of a child's drawing, showing a doll near a river and a dark shape in trees. The drawing was dated 2009, and the handwriting matched a sample from the missing child's school file. On the back, a typed line said, "Keep it sealed and stop digging." Claire reported the envelope, and security reviewed cameras that cover the mailroom. The footage was missing for the exact hour the envelope arrived, because the server hard drive failed. Marisol inspected the camera server, and she found the failure was not random. The hard drive's error logs showed a forced shutdown command issued from a workstation at the Annex upgrade station. That station was locked in a closet, and only 2 keys existed, one with facilities and one with Jonah. Jonah was documented at court that morning, processing unrelated evidence, and his badge scan confirmed it. Facilities claimed their key never left the ring, but no one could prove it. Claire asked for external help, and her director refused, citing liability and budget limits. In state records, the Annex upgrade was listed as completed early, even though Marisol still had open tickets. Claire then requested the original Garner case file through formal channels, and she received a thin packet missing key witness pages. She compared it to an archived note scan from a county file from 2009, and the missing pages existed there. Those pages mentioned a volunteer who found a doll by the water, then refused to give a statement. The volunteer's name was crossed out in ink, and the ink bled through like it was applied later. Jonah searched the name anyway, and it belonged to a man who died in 2019. His death certificate listed drowning, even though he lived far from open water. Investigators never confirmed any connection, but locals in Binghamton still talked about that death. On a Friday evening, Jonah stayed late to move the doll into a state evidence locker, following a new directive that appeared in his inbox. The directive referenced state policy, but Marisol later confirmed the sender domain was slightly misspelled. Jonah said he noticed the error only after he arrived at the locker room and found it unlocked. He placed the bagged doll inside a bin, and he logged the placement on paper because the terminal was down. When he returned the next morning, the bin contained only the empty bag, sliced cleanly along the seam. The paper log was gone, and the terminal now showed the bin was never used. Claire demanded a meeting with county leadership, and she brought printed screenshots of audit trails and dispatch logs. The room was quiet as she spoke, and she kept her voice flat to avoid sounding theatrical. Leadership responded with a new order: stop referencing the Garner file and focus on current digitization targets. They said the doll would be transferred to an off-site facility, and they refused to share which one. Claire asked for a chain of custody form, and the director said one would be generated later. No form ever appeared in the shared system, and archived notes of the meeting were not saved. State records later showed the transfer as completed in 2020, which was not the year it happened. Months passed, and Claire tried to close the loop by filing a public records request under her own name. The response packet reportedly included a single page stating the doll was destroyed as contaminated material. The page carried a supervisor's signature, but it did not match any signature on file for that supervisor. Jonah quietly obtained dispatch logs for the destruction date, and the logs showed no transport call, no escort, and no facility intake. Marisol searched the barcode again, and the number now returned a hit linked to an unrelated burglary case. That hit appeared only after her query, then vanished when she refreshed. Records, conflict, and the system never explained why. In the following winter, a reporter asked about the Garner case during a community forum in Broome County. A sheriff's representative said the case remained open, then corrected himself and said it was closed by lack of evidence. Claire sat in the audience, and she wrote down the wording exactly for her own files. Later, the forum transcript posted online omitted the exchange, replaced by a note that audio was unclear. Claire checked archived notes on the forum host's site, and the audio clip was present there. The clip included one more line, a request not to mention the doll, followed by a pause. No one claimed that pause meant anything, but it became part of local talk. Claire kept working, and she did not publish accusations because she could not prove intent or identity. Jonah transferred precincts, and Marisol took a new contract out of state, leaving only partial documentation behind. The only lasting artifact was Claire's personal notebook, with dates written out and copies of county file references from 2009. In the final pages, she described a last search through the annex, where she found the crate lid, but not the crate. The lid had a new barcode sticker, and under it she saw the same handwritten word, Leela. Some locals claimed the doll would always return, but investigators never confirmed any return at all. Next story: empty eyes. In Duluth, Minnesota, 3 unrelated reports described the same detail: a face with eyes that looked missing, flat, and pale. In late October 2019, Leah Hargrove was 32, a county archivist, and she drove north for a redevelopment records review. She'd been hired to verify which condemned properties still carried unresolved liability notes in state records and insurance filings. The address on her work order belonged to an old annex near West Duluth, a brick structure once used for overflow classrooms. Her contact was Martin Quad, 41, a city building inspector assigned to escort visitors through unsafe interiors and document hazards. Leah arrived before dusk with a hard hat, a phone camera, and a binder of archived notes from prior county surveys. Martin met her at the gate and reviewed the plan. Quick photos, quick measurements, then a locked exit within 30 minutes. He said locals called the annex Hollow House, reportedly because windows reflected faces poorly, making eyes seem washed away at night. Leah didn't comment, and she focused on official language, permit dates, emergency postings, and a county file from 2009. The file included a prior fire inspection, several vandalism reports, and a short entry about an unexplained alarm activation. Dispatch logs, according to the summary, showed a silent trip at 2:14 a.m. during 2011 with no responder entry. Records conflict, because the city alarm vendor listed a battery failure that week, yet the police ledger noted an open door. Martin led Leah through a side entrance where plywood had been pulled loose, leaving a narrow opening with fresh splinters. Inside, the smell was wet plaster and old paper, and the floor dust showed recent shoe prints heading deeper. Martin said those prints weren't there during his last check, and he radioed the office, receiving no reply. Leah photographed a hallway map on the wall, then compared it to her binder, noticing the annex rooms had been renumbered. They moved carefully, and Martin kept his flashlight low, scanning for broken glass, exposed nails, and sagging ceiling panels. In the first classroom, Leah found a stack of ripped attendance sheets, damp but readable, dated September 2007. Someone had circled several student names in thick marker, then added a note that read, "Eyes empty," in uneven capitals. Martin said he'd never seen that before, and he photographed it for his report, then sealed the pages in a bag. Leah asked if the annex ever served as a shelter or clinic, but Martin said it was only classrooms and storage. Still, archived notes in Leah's binder mentioned a short-term lease to a counseling program, though investigators never confirmed details. They reached the stairwell, where the metal handrail was cold and slick and the landing window had been painted over. Leah noticed faint handprints on that paint, as if someone pressed fingers into it before it fully dried. Martin said the paint job was from the previous winter, and the city contractor documentation listed no follow-up visits. At the second floor corridor, Leah saw a line of small mirrors nailed between classrooms, each mirror cracked in the center. Some locals claimed staff once used them for supervision, yet the placement made little sense since they reflected only blank walls. Leah photographed each mirror and logged their position, while Martin checked doorways for movement, listening for breathing. A dull thump came from the far end, then a softer scrape, like a shoe dragging across grit near a locker. Martin called out for anyone inside to identify themselves, and he stated his name, his job, and the city's authority. No one answered, but Leah heard a faint, rhythmic tapping, as if knuckles touched glass, then stopped when she moved. They approached together, and the corridor temperature dropped, though the building had no active power and no open windows. At the last classroom, the door stood ajar, and Martin pushed it wider with his flashlight, avoiding the handle. A cheap video camera sat on a student desk, pointed at the doorway, with a red light blinking like it was recording. Leah asked who set it there, and Martin said it wasn't city equipment, and he didn't recognize the model. Next to it lay a paper sign, handwritten, that said, "Look up," then a second line, "Don't trust your eyes." Leah kept filming with her phone, and she read the sign aloud, then stopped, as if hearing someone behind them. Martin turned fast, sweeping the corridor, but the hallway was empty, and their earlier footprints were still visible. Leah pointed at the camera screen on the desk, where a preview image showed the doorway, yet the colors looked inverted. In that preview, Leah's face appeared pale, and her eyes looked like smooth white patches, lacking pupils or depth. She blinked and leaned closer, and the effect remained, while Martin's face on the same preview looked normal. Leah stepped back, and on her own phone screen, she looked ordinary, which made the desk camera seem strangely selective. Martin suggested the camera had a filter, yet the menu icons were missing, and the buttons were taped over. Leah reached toward the camera, then stopped when she saw a small note taped to its side, reportedly copied from a police memo. The note referenced an incident in 2011, and it claimed responders avoided eye contact with a person inside. Dispatch logs don't include that wording, yet an archived notes section in Leah's binder mentioned a responder who quit days later. Leah said the binder note was secondhand, a clerk's summary, and it couldn't be treated as verified fact. Martin tried his radio again, and this time a voice replied, broken by static, telling them to exit immediately. The voice belonged to Janelle Ruiz, 29, a paramedic with the county service, sent after a nearby caller reported screams. Janelle said she was outside the gate and saw lights in the second-floor corridor, even though the building was dark. Martin told her the building had no power, and Janelle answered that the lights moved, like a flashlight sweeping without a hand. Leah and Martin started back, but their route changed, because the stairwell door was now closed, and a chair braced it. Neither of them had placed the chair, and the floor dust around it showed fresh drag marks leading toward the corridor. Martin tried forcing the door, then stopped when he heard tapping again, closer, and matched to his breathing pace. Leah backed away, and she noticed a new shape in the dust, a barefoot print, narrow, child-sized, crossing their path. State records listed no children present and no recent trespass arrests, but some locals claimed teens dared each other inside. Leah said the barefoot print looked too clean, with crisp toe ridges, as if pressed by wet skin, then dried instantly. Martin ordered Leah to stay behind him, and he moved toward the classroom with the desk camera, searching for another exit. Inside, the camera was still blinking, and the preview now showed the room, yet the doorway was empty, and the corridor looked darker. Leah saw her face again on that preview, and her eyes again appeared blank, while Martin's eyes remained normal. She lowered her gaze, then heard a soft voice from the corridor say her last name, spoken carefully, almost practiced. Martin demanded to know who was there, and he stepped into the corridor, raising his flashlight to shoulder height. Leah stayed in the doorway and recorded, and she caught a brief reflection in a cracked mirror across the hall. In that mirror, a figure stood behind Martin, close enough to touch him. But when Leah looked up, nothing stood there. She looked back at the mirror, and the figure was gone, yet a smudge remained, like a fogged breath mark on glass. Martin's flashlight beam shook, and he said he felt someone watching, and he refused to look toward the mirrors again. They moved fast toward a fire exit marked on the old hallway map, but the door had been painted shut along its seam. Leah pulled at it, scraping her nails, and the paint flaked away in long curls, revealing older layers beneath. Under the paint, someone had written names again, in rows, like a roster, and several names matched the 2007 sheets. At the bottom, a final line read, "Eyes empty," and below it, "Watch them look," in smaller letters. Martin used his tool to pry the door, and it opened with a pop, and cold air rushed in from outside. They ran down the exterior stairs, and Janelle met them at the fence, asking why Leah's face looked so pale. Leah asked what she meant, and Janelle said, "Your eyes. They look wrong, like you're staring through me without eyes." Leah turned her phone camera to selfie mode, and she looked normal, which made Janelle's comment feel detached from evidence. Janelle later wrote in her report that Leah avoided eye contact, though Leah and Martin both disputed that description. Records conflict again because Janelle's body camera shows Leah speaking steadily, yet the image briefly glitches when Leah looks up. That glitch appears as a white smear where Leah's eyes should be, lasting less than 1 second, then clearing. Investigators never confirmed whether the smear was compression error, moisture on the lens, or a lighting artifact. In the following week, Leah requested additional documents from the county archive, focusing on the annex lease and counseling program. A county file from 2009 included a complaint about staff photographing students, but the complaint had no conclusion. Archive notes referenced a private contractor who installed cameras for behavior monitoring, reportedly to track eye contact during sessions. State records list that contractor as dissolved in 2012, and their storage unit contents were auctioned with no inventory. Leah also found a dispatch logs addendum where a caller described a person standing in a window with no visible eyes. The addendum date was 2011, but the handwriting looked newer and the file stamp didn't match the other pages. Leah asked the clerk about it, and the clerk said records were recopied after a water leak and some stamps changed. Martin filed his own report, noting illegal cameras, damaged exits, and evidence of recent entry, but he avoided describing faces. Janelle, however, told a coworker that Leah's stare felt empty, and that line later appeared in an unofficial training anecdote. Some locals claimed the annex was used for experiments, yet county leadership denied it, and no verified program paperwork supports that claim. 2 months later, in early January 2020, Leah received an unmarked envelope at her office with a memory card inside. The card contained a single video file showing the annex corridor as if filmed from the desk camera perspective. The timestamp metadata was missing and the audio was faint, but the hallway mirrors were visible, each cracked the same way. In the video, Leah enters the corridor and her eyes appear blank. Then she looks toward the mirror and the image distorts. Leah forwarded the file to the county IT unit and they said it was copied many times with mismatched encoding fragments. They couldn't prove it came from the annex, yet the wall scuffs and map sign matched Leah's photos from late October. Leah asked Martin if any city devices went missing, and he said no, but he admitted he'd seen new footprints afterward. Martin returned once with a police escort, and they found the desk camera gone and the cracked mirrors smashed into powder. Dispatch logs show no forced entry call that day, yet a neighbor reportedly saw a van parked nearby, engine idling for hours. The neighbor couldn't provide plates, and the street camera at the intersection was offline due to a maintenance outage. Leah kept working her archive job, but coworkers later noted she stopped looking at people during conversations, keeping her gaze low. Leah denied that change, and she said she was simply stressed by deadlines and she refused to discuss the annex again. Janelle, meanwhile, transferred to a different county, and she told friends she didn't want to run calls near old schools. Martin filed a final closure note stating the annex should be demolished, yet the demolition bid stalled over ownership disputes. In summer 2021, the building remained, and teens posted videos online claiming they saw faces in mirrors. Those videos show shaky flashlights and heavy compression, and investigators never confirmed whether any faces were present at all. Still, the comments always mention the same detail: empty eyes, white and flat, appearing only when someone looks straight in. Leah's last documented connection came from an archived notes entry in late 2022 when she requested mirror safety guidelines. The request cited no reason, and the clerk simply logged it, but the county file from 2009 was pulled again. Records conflict on who accessed it afterward, because the sign-out sheet lists Leah, yet a later scan shows Martin's badge number. No one ever reconciled that discrepancy, and the annex remains a quiet line item waiting for paperwork to catch up.